If you are encrypting your devices, where are those decryption keys stored? A very interesting article dropped this weekend, and it is imperative that we talk about it. Welcome back to Switch to Linux. If you like this type of content, subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below. And of course, we are going to be talking about encryption and Microsoft. We are in our Microsoft background here. However, this was not going to wait for Windows Wednesday, and I wanted to talk a little bit broader about it than just Microsoft here. And of course, we are talking here about computer encryption. And I like computer encryption. I think we should have a right to have encryption. I know some governments around the world are trying to stop it, but the problem is we need encryption because there's just too many bad actors out there. I'm in a situation where I'm in a mobile environment and, what if I go out for a walk one day and someone busts in here and steals all the computers I have? Well, data encryption is very useful for the fact that at least the vastest majority of my computers and the information we have is safe behind encryption. And that certainly is something that we need to keep in mind, that it is important. If somebody breaks into your house and steals a computer, encryption prevents them from accessing data on that computer. Now, in our modern day, however, we have much more greater risk from cyber attacks, and the type of encryption we're talking about is not particularly useful against those cyber attacks because it really is encryption that is there while the device is turned off. If you're actively using it and malware is installed, even if your drive is encrypted, bad actors can still access data. But that being said, having encryption on data is important. Why? Well, one of my computers does nothing but banking. It has easy access to all the different banking accounts that I have over there. And it has all of my budgets and the finances and everything else I have. And I keep that computer very encrypted. You need to decrypt it. You need to open it up again with your pass keys, and then you can access the information. Other computers that I have just personal files, so detailed account information, lifetime backups, a lot of things like that. And I just don't want that type of sensitive life data falling in the hands of bad actors. So I keep those encrypted. My main basic media PC, that is encrypted because it's just an all-purpose computer that could have access to a lot of different things. I don't want somebody walking off with that hard drive and accessing it. Things like the computer here that this channel is run on, I don't actually have this one encrypted because, frankly, it's, everything that happens on this computer eventually leaks out into the public anyway, willingly by me. And so there's not a huge reason to encrypt everything over here. I do have an encrypted password manager that is more local, and so there certainly is that. Of course, I need that just to access the various accounts necessary to push our stuff live, but it doesn't have any email accounts on it. It doesn't have any financial accounts, doesn't have any banking accounts, just the stuff I need to run a channel. And that's very important. But the difference is I've set up all these computers, I have intentionally turned on encryption myself. I know what I'm getting into. I know what a passkey is. I know how to treat it. I know where to save it. These are all very important things. Now, I started talking about 2 years ago is really when we started doing our Windows Wednesdays, as I started noticing that Microsoft started to enable encryption on people's computers, and many of them didn't know it. Now, it is a little bit more refined now that you have at least you have a warning about it, although the average person doesn't know what that means. However, we at least now have the ability to have a little bit more active participation. However, it's still not the best. Now, a couple years ago, September of 2022, here is this person writes an article saying, hey, Bitlocker automatically activated on private Windows computers. What's going on? He asks Microsoft. And so effectively, other people are saying, yeah, we've had the same thing happen. Not really sure what's going on. All of a sudden, Bitlocker wasn't on, and all of a sudden our data is encrypted. What's going on here? And so we have the Microsoft employee moderator here tells us that yes, effectively Bitlocker process is now automated in Windows and does not need any policy to get enabled. It will automatically encrypt the device and back up the recovery key in the following scenarios. They list 4 scenarios. Of course, one of these is a clean installation of Windows 10 or 11 completed, the out-of-box experience, and the computer is prepared for first use. As part of the preparation, Bitlocker device encryption is initialized on the operating system drive and fixed data drives in the computer with a clear key. This is the equivalent of a standard Bitlocker suspend state. In this state, the drive is showing with a warning icon on Windows Explorer. The yellow warning is removed after the TPM protector is created and the recovery key is backed up, as explained in the following bullet points. So that's your basic one. Basically, everybody out of the box got this encrypted. Once you, of course, met these stringent requirements, the Microsoft hoisted upon us with the TPM chip and the Microsoft account. Now, the other ones were, are you connected to a domain, Azure, or Microsoft? Of course, they want every computer tied to a Microsoft account. Very interesting. And then if the user uses a domain account to sign in, clear key isn't removed. Okay, so they're basically talking here about other means that you have, and then signing into the domain account. This is where you're getting signed into the Azure ID. And the default then initially was just storing it in your Microsoft account. Now we have a little bit more of an option. So this is the best image that I could find about it. So if you enable Bitlocker encryption, so you should see this screen when you're first setting up your computer or something very similar. You'll notice that they really want you to save that key to your Microsoft account. You can also save it to a file, or you can print the recovery keys. Now here is where we have a problem that your average person right now still struggles with doing a password that's not like my name 123 or password 123. People are still struggling with the old ways of passkeys. Now we're moving in this world where everybody wants MFA and 2FA and texting codes, and it's one of those issues that we encounter as web developers that is getting progressively annoying. That, hey, you want me to get stuff done, it needs done right now, and you do not realize I cannot access your account until you and I get together and get a 2FA key. You know what I mean? And so, unfortunately, many companies don't realize that. Some of the companies are doing better. GoDaddy has delegate access. Despite as clunky and stupid as that program is, at least it exists. In Google products, I can go in and say, hey, add me as a admin to your account, and I can do that. And there's a number of different ways you can do that as well in Meta services as well. But the point is here is that people are still struggling with this. Your average person turning this on has no earthly idea what this screen is about. They don't know what a recovery key is. They don't know how to use it. They have no idea what it's for. And most of them just say next, and it just automatically saves to their Microsoft account. Of course, then they don't ever have to interact with it, which causes it to go away. This is why I have a restreaming server that I use, and I could set that up to use the same streaming keys every week. I intentionally don't, so I don't forget how to manage my server, okay? Because if I just go in there and set the keys once, and I haven't really changed anything in that system in 3 years, other than basic system updates, I'd have forgotten a long time ago how I managed that restreaming service. But because I continue to use it every single week and update it every single week with updated streaming keys, I have a better understanding. Well, this is what the simplicity of what Microsoft is doing. You have the TPM 2.0 module, which is where the first round of those passkeys are stored. People don't even know their computer's encrypted. They turn the computer on. They don't even know there's an encryption key. And so even if they've saved the thing in their file or they saved the thing as a printed key, they don't know where it is. They've lost it because they've never needed to use it before. They don't understand what it is. They don't understand that this is something that you keep like with your car title and your mortgage deed. These are the things that you do. And that is certainly one of the factors that we need to keep in mind here. Now, the problem is that the default Microsoft wants to make everything easy, and so they want you to store those encryption keys in the cloud. And I have been warning people for a long time that this would allow anybody who gets their hands on those keys, including law enforcement, to decrypt it. And a bunch of people have accused me of spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Well, unfortunately, this dude was right again. I keep on being right about weird stuff, okay? Microsoft gave the FBI the decryption keys to unlock an encrypted data on a Windows computer. How wonderful. All right. So they said they received 20 requests for Bitlocker keys every year and will provide them to the government in response to valid court orders. But companies like Apple and Meta set their systems so such a privacy violation isn't possible. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. At least I did a deep dive into Google on this, so we'll use that as our example. But what happened here is there was some alleged koof fraud in Guam. And so some computers were seized, 3 laptops specifically, and they're like, hey, we suspect that there's criminal data on this, and we can't get access to the data. Hey, Microsoft, do you have the decryption keys for these laptops? And Microsoft looks at it and go, well, yes, we do. Here you are. And they gave the decryption keys that were conveniently stored in their Microsoft account, and they put those conveniently stored in their Microsoft account keys, they put those, right into the hands of the FBI. He said the company receives around 20 requests for keys per year, and in many cases, the user had not stored their keys in the cloud, making it impossible for Microsoft to assist. So this, just to understand what's going on here, you have a physical computer that is locked with a decryption key, that when you turn that computer on and access that PIN code that you've set up, or your biometric face ID or anything like that, it pings the TPM module and unlocks that data. Well, the FBI doesn't have access to the PIN or the biometric stuff, and so they cannot access the data on the physical computer. So they reached out to Microsoft, because they knew who the people were. And hey, Microsoft, this is a Windows 11 computer we see, or it was 10. They didn't specify it was 10 or 11. Would you happen to have the keys to unlock the data on this? And Microsoft said, well, yes, we do. And they handed the data on over, and the FBI used that data and unlocked these hard drives, demonstrating the fraud. Now, I am all for fraudsters getting arrested. I am all for it. I would love to see fraudsters all over the country arrested and thrown in prison. But I don't want you to store all of your data inside of Microsoft clouds. I want them to do good old-fashioned police work that does not require on a big tech company spying on me, weakening my privacy, and weakening my security. Let them go ahead and do that, okay? But in this particular case in Guam, it was the first known instance where Redmond company, Microsoft, I don't know why they're saying the Redmond company. It's Microsoft, okay, or Microslop, better off, has provided encryption keys. So back in 2013, a Microsoft engineer claimed he was approached by government officials to install backdoors into Bitlocker, but he turned the requests down. And so effectively, what happened here is, since Microsoft is storing the decryption keys, it becomes very dangerous for privacy or security, not to mention the fact that they can access the stuff. They just don't. Like, it's our contract. We have ironclad contracts. Our employees can't access data. Yeah, when some scammer's dangling $10,000 over them, I bet that they can find the decryption keys and hand them over, and that's the thing. The best way to not have a bad actor steal my data is if the company doesn't have the data to begin with. And that's really what we're getting onto here. And so this guy from Johns Hopkins, Matt Green, says the private data on a private computer, and they made the architectural choice to hold access to that data. They absolutely should be treating it like something that belongs to the user. That's what he said. And he continued, if Apple can do it and Google can do it, then Microsoft can do it. Microsoft is the only company not doing it, he says. It's a little weird. The lesson here is if you have If you have access to the keys, eventually law enforcement is going to come. Now, to be clear, what he's saying is Apple does not have access to the data on your physical computer. If you store that stuff in their cloud, in some instances, like in UK now that they want the backdoor access, they've turned off any decryption. Allegedly, Apple says if you are using that Apple encryption, they say they can't see the data that's stored. I don't know if that's 100% true because they still do have that CSAM scanning stuff capable of working. So I don't know. Google, in this case, if you store data on Google, I wanted to do a deep dive into this because I remember that Google password manager thing. And so I wanted to dig in and find out, would it be possible for law enforcement to gain access to the passwords you have in Google Password Manager? This is important because if they can access that data, they can see every account you have and gain access to every account you have. So I wanted to do a deep dive into that. Unfortunately, I can't find any modern information on this, other than transparency reports, which are not particularly transparent. All right, so this is asked 12 years ago, last modified 5 years ago. Can Google employees see my passwords saved in Google Chrome? Now, there's a couple caveats to this. There is a way to save your passwords on a local machine through Google Chrome, not through the Google Password Manager. But there is also a Google Password Manager that would allow you to sync those passwords across your various devices. Of course, I would never use anything like this, even the open source Bitwarden, because under no circumstance am I going to have any of my password vaults on any online account anywhere. And that is something that we need to keep in mind. So there is some discussion and some clarity. We're talking about your passwords are stored in Google, not on the local machine. And they say the short answer here is no. Effectively, what they say here is that the passwords are encrypted with the password of your Google account as the decryption key. Now, the problem is, of course, is could Google reset that? Technically, I think they possibly could. I have a sneaky suspicion on some technical level they could. So on some technical level, yes, they might be able to access those files under a law enforcement request. And so I couldn't find really any information on this article. And so I just kind of started to see, first, let's dig into what does Google itself say about it. So this is actually the one where you're syncing your passwords, bookmarks, and other things across all devices. You know, bookmarks, history, and open tabs, passwords, payment info, and addresses, phone numbers, and more. When you turn up the sync, you can sync all of these different things to any device that is accessing your Google account. And so now, apparently, there is them centralized on Google servers, a database of all of your passwords and this other information. Is that accessible via a warrant or via a rogue employee? That really was my question. Unfortunately, I did not really get any clear answers, at least on the default. But it would appear, if you use this the default way with just your Google password, reading between the lines, it does appear the answer is yes. Such data could be de-anonymized. Such data could possibly be handed over. Why do I say that is true? Because they actually do have this section here on keeping info private with a passphrase. And they say here, with a passphrase, you can use Google's cloud to store and sync your Chrome data without letting Google read it. So if you are using Google's password manager, you want to set a passphrase. Apparently, based on this reading of this paragraph, if you're using basically just your Google account to sync your passwords, allegedly, I'm going to argue opinion that Google can gain access to this data and could hand it over on a lawful law enforcement request, because the default is not to set it up with a passphrase. But they say with a passphrase, you can use your Google's cloud to store and sync your Chrome data without letting Google read it. Your payment methods and addresses from Google Play aren't encrypted by a passphrase. Passphrases are optional to reduce the risk of data breaches. Your sync data is always protected, of course, by industry-leading encryption, blah, blah. Of course. Everything is encrypted with industry-leading encryption these days. If you're having trouble syncing with your passphrase, you may have to update Google Chrome to the latest version. Okay, that's interesting. And then they have instructions on this, and then they also, though, have a few warnings. When you have a passphrase, you'll need it whenever you turn sync on somewhere new. You'll need to enter your passphrase in your device where you've already turned sync on. Your feed will not show suggestions based on sites you browse in Chrome. Well, that's neat. You can't check your saved passwords on passwords.google.com or use Smart Lock for passwords, and all your history won't sync on all devices. So apparently, if you are using the Google Password Manager, setting the passphrase is the only way to keep anybody else from seeing it. So that is reading between the lines, but I couldn't even find a statement from Google on can Google access these, which is funny because every other product, they have some form of statement. Whether you can believe their statement or not believe their statement, I don't know, but at least they have one. It's the same thing with RCS. It would appear Google says we can't read the messages, but there's a lot of things to suggest there's circumstances when they can. Okay. Interesting. They do not have a statement one way or the other that I could find on this. And so I wanted to dig next into what happens when law enforcement requests information from Google. And I'll just parenthetically say Facebook and Apple follow a lot of these similar principles in Google, where allegedly law enforcement cannot gain access because they do not have encryption keys, allegedly. And we saw, at least in Apple's case, that play out in the San Bernardino case a couple years ago, like a decade ago now, where Apple's like, yeah, we can't decrypt that, bro. Sorry. But we're talking now about what about other data on the account. Could Apple decrypt data on that account? I think they probably can, but I don't know completely, and I didn't dig into it closely. So here is in the transparency reports, this is the global request for user information. So the blue line represents a specific request, and the red number indicates the number of accounts included in those requests. So according to this, allegedly it looks like for each request from law enforcement, they're looking for an average of about 2.3, 2.4 or so different accounts involved in that request, which is probably a lot of one-to-ones and then a whole lot of those, carpet bomb warrants, give me everything. All right. But starting back here, let's see, back here in 2029, you can see that there's only 12,000 requests for disclosure of data, and up to the last year they have reports, June 2025, it was 287,000 requests over 664,000 total user accounts involved. So that's how many different law enforcement requests, and they had their low was only a 60% response request, and their high looks like 83%. So between 60 and 83% of the time, Google responds and hands over the data. And then 3,413 total diplomatic requests, and then you can download all the data. But now the question I had is, what data is given up? And so with what data is given up, we see more information over here about the types of information, how do they handle it? And this is the closest we got, but this is not all inclusive. This is, quote, typical. So are they telling us in their transparency report? Are they being transparent in their transparency report? Can they give access to password managers, other stored data, addresses, payment information, browsing history, all this kind of stuff? They don't tell us because their transparency report is not particularly transparent. Okay, this down here is not an all-inclusive thing. This is, let's look at four services from which agents commonly request information. Not all-inclusive. So we don't know exactly what type of information. I would like to see Google in their transparency report. This is their transparency reports, right? I'd like them to be transparent to know exactly what services and exactly what they can give over. Otherwise, they're not being particularly transparent. But here it has Gmail, what information? The content of your emails. So somebody can read the content of your emails. If it weren't so, they couldn't possibly hand it over. YouTube, copy of private video and associated video information and private message content. Do we have private messages anymore? I don't know. But private videos, any videos you have up there that are not available to the public. Google Voice. So information, stored text message content, stored voicemail content. So if they want to, like if they want to go through and I actually have a Google Voice number on the public facing number on my business for all those scammers out there trying to do something. So if the government would like to scan through it, more power to you, I guess. But I don't agree with it. I think it's bad, but it just made sense that that's what I do for that. And maybe eventually I'll look into my own self-hosted VoIP system for that. I don't know. That'd be fun. And then, of course, Blogger, if you're using Blogger, your various things and private blog posts and comment content. So, they can see all the different easy things accessible. But what they don't have is, what information they can give on each one of their individual services. So all that being said is that when we start relying on we start relying on big tech to talk about these various types of accounts that we have, they could very easily be giving up our data, and that is a net loss for us in the long run. So that's one of those things to keep in mind. Now, all that being said, I do like encryption, but you should not ever be storing your encryption keys on any form of big tech in any way that is accessible to anybody. Even if the company has the best security in the world, they may have a rogue employee in there. Suppose that you just fall on the wrong side of some political discussion. Well, guess what? Whether it's Orange Man bad or some blue donkey over there, you're going to fall on one side of their bad sides or the other. Okay. And I don't want a turnkey government to make anybody's data vulnerable, whether I agree with their political positions or not. I don't think that anybody should have their data handed over by some big tech company, particularly a company like Microsoft, which is forcing you to encrypt that information and highly suggesting you put that information to decrypt that data in their servers for your convenience. And that certainly is a fundamental problem. So encrypt your drives by all means. Do not store those encryption keys in places that is easy for other people to gain. That is my lesson and my warning for you. So thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts about all this in the comments down below.